Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and welcome back to another development update of Scoot Kaboom and the Tomb of Doom. So this is the game we've been working on for the last while. We've had a few development videos in the last few months here on the channel, and I figured it was about time to take another look about what I've been working on the game. It's kind of been a little bit slower for the last while, but we've got some cool things added in, so I figured the best way to do it is just to dive in to the current build of the game and just have a quick look around and see what's new and what's interesting, hopefully, about the game going forward. So one of the first major things that I've added in now, I wanted to actually start working on some of the systems, not necessarily the level design of the game, because in the previous video we got to the point where the actual level itself was essentially mostly done. There's still a few tweaks to be made in various different areas to make things not as challenging in some places, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I wanted to start adding some of the main systems into the game. So if I hit my start button here, we now have the ability to select between a few different characters. So you can go with Scoot, Croc or Izzy. These are pretty placeholdery for now. We'll have more characters going forward. You can also change the type of food your character wants to go after in the intro and as the prize for completing the whole level. That is their little bit of motivation. And there's a few other things which we'll dive into a little bit more, but these were the first couple of things I added in. So when you go and start the game now, you play as your little bit of a character, and then you can go over and get your little bit of card. This is basically what I worked on next after the last video. So now you can run around, you can play as whatever character you want to, and the idea will be that we'll unlock more characters as you complete the game and do different challenges, like complete the game with having a certain amount of deaths, for example, or different things like that. I've also, as you can kind of see in the background here, started adding some better background tile sets in, not just the, if you look over on the right over there, you can see what I had in the background previously. We had this kind of grid looking stuff that was just there as a placeholder, so hopefully this stuff is looking a bit more interesting and we'll add more variety to it as we go a little bit further. But at the moment it's not completely done, because obviously we still have lots of these grid areas around the place. If we look around very quickly, you can see them all in place here. So I added those new bits of backgrounds in. Obviously that's more to be done on those, but also during this time I finally got the game into a few people's hands to start testing the game and getting some good feedback from people, which has led me to do some changes that I've made to the game too. So I fixed up a few areas that were a little bit challenging. For example, oh no, I died, so that's not great. Let's go over to this area down here. There was a bit of a drop down here that was too hard too early in the game, so it was too much of a challenge, which makes it not really all that much fun. There's a couple of other saws and things over here, and just tidying up a few different areas, which is something that's going to have to be kept working on as we go forward, because obviously everything is going to be perfect straight away or anything like that. But that also led me to actually getting to a couple of things that were already on my agenda to do. For example, changing how the character actually moves. Although it's not visually very apparent, this is something that took a bit of work, which was to make the character not just use Unity's default physics system. It uses its own custom raycasting system to move me around the world. And one of the things that fixes is there was a chance, if you walked over to the edge of a platform here like this, if I could stand right on the edge, my character would technically be in the air. So it would be in the air animation, but the character would actually look like, or you wouldn't be able to jump or anything like that. It was a weird kind of situation that could occur, and now it doesn't occur anymore because we fixed it. Obviously, that's the important thing you want to do when you're working on a game. But one of the other major things that I really wanted to add in was adding some gameplay assists into the game. So this is something that I always had on my agenda to do, which is, if I pause the game here, if I go into assists, there's a few extra options here to make the game easier for different people, because although I have a set amount of challenge that I want the game to have, and that's the design challenge, there's nothing more frustrating than just not being able to complete a game. And there's no point, I don't want players to get that feeling where they're just banging their head against the wall and they can't make any progress. So there's some extra things in here to make the game a little bit easier to get through for players who maybe just don't want to have to deal with dying repeatedly over and over again. So one of the basic ones is just adding more checkpoints in. So if I turn that on and go back into the game, you'll see now there's this purple one that I just hit here. But if I go over here now, there's also these blue checkpoints. So these blue checkpoints are extra bonus checkpoints that are added in to make it so that when you get past a particularly hard section, you don't have to repeatedly go back through it over and over again. Now, part of the challenge that I want in the game is to have these long sections where if you die, you have to go back to each major purple checkpoint. But that's not always going to be the most ideal way for everybody to play the game. So it's just there to add an extra bit of extra help along the way. So obviously we also then have a double jump ability, which is just to allow the player to kind of get over some gaps a little bit easier than what they could do otherwise. Obviously this little section here doesn't really demonstrate that. Let's go over to one of these areas here, for example. So maybe in this section you're meant to jump up onto those. So maybe if with the double jump you're able to get up into these areas a little bit easier, like so, and you can get through them a little bit better. It's hard for me to do it when I'm also talking because I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing here. But you can see it'll just add a little bit of extra safety to how you play the game. Then obviously if I go down here, we've got invincibility. So invincibility is pretty self-explanatory. This is the kind of cheat mode in the game. Essentially, you can just run through everything. This is kind of inspired by Celeste, that game that came out a few years ago, which could be quite frustrating in places. And I know when I played through the game, there were sections of it where I put the game on. I made myself invincible so I can get through certain sections, and that didn't change how I enjoyed the game. It just made it so I didn't have to deal with the frustrating sections along the way. So I thought that was a really good thing to have in your game in general. And then finally in the assist section we have the tomb speed, so I can put this way down, and what this does is you can see the world around me now is going much slower, but my character himself is still going the same speed. So I'm invincible, so let's turn off the invincibility. Just go back down here. So now I can have much more time to make my decisions about what's going on, so I'm free to run around there while I manage to get myself killed. Again, not as easy to do when you're also talking at the same time. If I go over here, pay attention to what you're doing, James, for a second. If that thing, if I run over, there we go, I go down here. Now I have plenty of time for all these things to go by. If I put this back up to full speed, you'll see those bullets up above me will move a lot faster. So everything in the world will move faster when you are on normal speed, and if we slow it back down, we'll put it back to slow speed and everything goes a little bit slower. Again, just to make the game a little bit easier and a little bit more accessible for anybody who wants to play along the way. So that was one of the major things I really wanted to add in, and it'll be really interesting to see how that affects how people play the game and how many people will use those assists in the game in general. So if I go back into the main menu, the idea is you can add them as soon as you're starting the game. So you can go into the game knowing we're going to use some more checkpoints, we're going to stick with normal speed. There will be some different game modes that we can do as well, which hasn't been implemented yet, so no matter how many times I press this button here, nothing's going to happen. But if I go and jump into the game, you can run over. Probably should have changed my character to one of the other ones, but oh well. If we start level, so you can see we'll start off the level with those extra checkpoints in place here. And that was kind of one of the major things that was being worked on for the last while, just to make sure that all worked properly and to make sure that everything kind of flowed into place as we were going through the game. And it was kind of, it feels really good. It also makes testing the game a lot easier because I can just go back to certain areas a lot quicker. But I also, for my own purposes, I do have special shortcuts for, hey, I can just respawn right there if I want to. It's not really a problem. So a few other kind of things I fixed up were, for example, in this area here, if I go up here, it used to be that blocks, when they appear, if you were standing where a block was, that if I do the switch to make that appear, that used to just push you to the side. And obviously you can get in weird situations where sometimes you get pushed and you get pushed into a wall and things like that. So now I've made it so that when a block appears, it simply squashes the player. I think makes a lot more logical sense for what you're doing, and also adds an extra little bit of a challenge without being too unfair as you're playing through. I've also started working on a screen that will appear when you actually complete the level. So at the moment, if I just jump into it here, pretty rough, but the functionality of it is here. The idea is it'll pop up here, it'll tell you how quickly you completed the game, how many pickups you got when you respawn, or how many respawns you had, aka how many times you died, and it'll also show you if you unlock any new characters along the way. So this will be a way to display new things that you've unlocked in the game. And that's pretty much the main loop of the game that will happen. So most of that is in place now. So a lot of what is to come is tweaking what is already existing. So making the level design feel fairer to the player as you go through. And also I want to do the whole system that allow you to unlock different characters. Although we have those notifications popping up there, that currently doesn't actually do anything. It's just there to tell the player what you're doing. At the moment, also, my continue button here doesn't actually get me anywhere. But as I said, it's kind of going to be a lot of tweaking, a lot of doing the background art to make things look a bit nicer, adding some more characters in, adding some more food selections to add in. So if you've got any suggestions of crazy fun little food or goal things that your character could go chasing after, make sure and drop some comments in the chat and let me know what kind of things you would like to see. But most of the basics are now in place, so it's going to be a lot of polishing up what's here. And as anyone who has worked on games for a while knows, that stuff takes time. So it's not going to be done in the next week or two or anything like that, but the game is getting there and it will be done hopefully as soon as possible. So there you go. That's the latest update on Kaboom. I'll be back with more tutorials and goodness in the very near future. For now, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more, of course, and I'll see you all very soon.